The plastic stick trembled in Lena Grace Harper's hands as two pink lines stared back at her, bold and undeniable. She blinked hard, her hazel eyes stinging under the harsh bathroom light, praying the lines would fade like a cruel hallucination. But they stayed there, stubborn as her racing heartbeat. "Oh, God," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the low hum of the exhaust fan. The pregnancy test slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the cold marble floor of their high-rise condo in downtown Chicago. Lena stared at her reflection in the mirror. 30 years old, skin pale and blotchy with shock, wavy dark blonde hair scraped back in her usual no-nonsense bun that never stayed neat. Her blazer hung wrinkled on the back of the door, proof of another punishing day at the design firm where she spent more time taming panic attacks than sketching blueprints. She pressed a trembling palm against her flat stomach, trying to picture the tiny life growing inside her. A baby. Their baby. A fresh wave of dread pulsed through her ribs. How was she supposed to do this alone? A mortgage, endless deadlines, a husband who didn't even notice when she cried herself to sleep. What if I mess this up? The thought hissed like static in her head, louder than the fan. She could already see her coworkers' thin smiles, the whispers about her productivity, the pitying nods when she'd have to leave early for doctor appointments. For a terrifying second, she hated herself for not feeling only joy. The thought should have brought her warmth, but instead a familiar knot of fear twisted tighter in her chest. When was the last time she and Ethan had an actual conversation, not just the routine, "How was your day?" while he scrolled mindlessly through emails, but real words that meant something? She couldn't remember. The bathroom door rattled as someone knocked. "Lena, you okay in there?" Ethan's voice carried that same clipped impatience he used when board meetings dragged on too long. She hastily grabbed the pregnancy test, wrapped it in tissue, and shoved it into her blazer pocket. "Just a sec." Her hands trembled as she splashed cold water on her face, watching droplets cling to her lashes in the mirror. She looked exactly like what she felt, a woman barely treading water in her own life, while everyone else thought she had it all under control. The condo felt suffocating when she stepped out. Ethan stood in the sleek, modern kitchen, his 6'1" frame commanding the space even in sweats. His dark brown hair was styled perfectly, though it was almost 9 at night, and his smartwatch glowed beneath the pendant lights. Even at home, he looked like a glossy ad for successful CEOs. Finally, without glancing up, he muttered, "I've been waiting to tell you about the Harrington deal. 3 more companies are interested, and if we close by Friday..." Ethan's voice trailed off as Lena's reply came out smaller than she meant. "We're talking about a promotion that could change everything. Marshall basically guaranteed me the VP title. If, Ethan, please." He finally looked up, blue eyes flashing mild irritation. "What's wrong? You look pale." The words pressed heavy on her tongue. "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. Everything's about to change." But looking at him, really seeing him, she saw a stranger. When had the man she married turned into this polished, unreachable figure who measured life in quarterly reports and bonus structures? "I need to talk to you about something important." Ethan's phone buzzed. His eyes flicked to the screen instantly, and Lena watched that familiar glint of barely contained excitement he only ever saved for work updates. "Can it wait?" Cora just sent the preliminary projections for next quarter. Cora? The name slipped out before she could bite it back. The new analyst. Brilliant girl. She really sees the big picture. He was already tapping away again. "You'd like her. She's got this unstoppable drive, always 3 steps ahead." Something cold and sharp settled in Lena's gut. She'd heard that name before, murmured on late-night calls Ethan took in another room, dropped casually in conversations that fell silent the second she walked in. "How long have you been working with her?" "A few weeks." "Why?" But he didn't even look up, fingers flying across the screen. Lena stood frozen, the pregnancy test burning in her pocket like a hidden brand. She watched her husband pour all his fascination into someone else's ambition. The baby inside her deserved better than this. She deserved better than this. "Never mind," she whispered. "Okay." Ethan grunted, already turning toward his office. "I have to answer this. The investors are waiting." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Lena alone in their flawless kitchen that looked more like a catalog spread than a home. She pulled out her phone and opened her Trello board. Color-coded lists for groceries, meal prep, even anxiety control. Her fingers hovered, ready to add another list, another futile system to keep chaos at bay. But instead, she switched to her Notes app and typed, "Baby due, around February." Below that, after a long pause, "Tell Ethan when he's not busy." She stared at the words, knowing full well when he's not busy might never exist. Beyond their floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's skyline glittered with promise. Inside their designer condo, surrounded by curated furniture and modern art, Lena had never felt more alone. The pregnancy test seemed to pulse against her leg through the fabric of her pocket, a tiny plastic prophecy of change. Whether that change would save or destroy her marriage, Lena didn't know. 3 days had passed since she'd seen those pink lines, and she still hadn't found the right moment to tell Ethan. Every morning she practiced the words in the bathroom mirror, lining up her color-coded pens in perfect gradients. A nervous ritual that had only gotten worse since learning about the baby. "We need to talk. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." But every evening, Ethan came home even later than the night before, his thumbs already tapping away on his phone before he'd even shrugged off his coat. "Sorry, babe," he'd mutter, eyes never lifting. "Big pitch tomorrow." Cora's been incredible pulling the data together. Cora? Always Cora. Lena found herself scrolling through Instagram far too often, her thumb moving compulsively until it landed on the account that made her stomach twist. @CoraWest. The profile photo showed a striking young woman with sleek black hair and bold brown eyes, lips curved in a smile that practically dared the world to try her. "Living my best life. Never settle." The latest post was a mirror selfie in what looked like the marble bathroom of an upscale steakhouse. Cora wore a figure-hugging black dress Lena knew she'd never have the nerve to wear, her curves flaunted with practiced angles. The caption read, "When your mentor takes you out to celebrate closing the Harrington deal." So grateful for amazing leaders who believe in lifting others up. Lena's hazel eyes locked on the timestamp, 8:47 p.m. last night. The same night Ethan had texted he was stuck in back-to-back client calls. Her hand drifted to her stomach, where the nausea had become a daily ambush, unpredictable waves that hit her in elevators and during lunch meetings. She'd taken to stashing crackers in her blazer pocket, slipping them into her mouth between conference calls, when the sickness threatened to win. A sour thought scraped at her. Is this my fault? Maybe if she'd stayed interesting, stayed fun, stayed the bright young thing Ethan used to show off at parties, maybe then Cora West wouldn't exist at all. The shame tasted worse than the morning sickness. "Mrs. Harper?" Her assistant's voice snapped her out of it. "The Westbrook clients are here for their 2 o'clock. Lena quickly closed Instagram, cheeks hot with embarrassment at being caught stalking her husband's analyst. She smoothed her bun, tucking stray wisps behind her ear, and grabbed her iPad, her digital fortress of organized design sketches. The meeting dragged on, but Lena's pen drifted in the margins of her notes. Tiny houses with white fences, soft nursery colors, living rooms littered with toys. When Mr. Westbrook asked about timeline flexibility, Lena nearly blurted out that she'd be on maternity leave in 8 months. After the clients left, she sat alone in her office, staring at her sketches. These weren't the sleek minimalist designs her firm was famous for. These were homes. Warm, lived-in spaces where families grew, loved, and built memories together. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "Working late again, don't wait up." Another message followed right after. "Cora's really pushing to perfect the Griffin proposal. That kind of commitment is rare." Lena's thumb hovered over the keyboard. She started to type so many replies. "I'm pregnant. We need to talk. Do you remember you have a wife?" Instead, she typed, "Okay. There's leftover pasta in the fridge." At 11 p.m., Lena lay alone on their king-sized bed, listening to the hum of the city drifting through the windows. Ethan's side stayed cold and untouched. She fell asleep clutching her phone, praying for another message, any sign he remembered she existed. The front door finally clicked open at 12:43 a.m. She pretended to sleep as Ethan crept through the condo, the blue glow of his phone screen tracing patterns along the hallway walls. Even now, almost 1 a.m., he was still scrolling. "Lena?" he whispered. "You awake?" For a heartbeat, hope fluttered weakly in her chest. Maybe now. Maybe he'll sit down, touch my face, ask if I'm okay. But another voice in her head, the one that never quite went silent, hissed that she was foolish to hope. How many times had she laid like this, desperate for scraps of the man she used to know? But when she didn't answer right away, she heard his quiet sigh, and then the soft click of the guest bathroom door. The shower ran for 20 minutes, far longer than his usual quick rinse. When he finally slipped into bed, he smelled of expensive soap and something else, something floral, young, perfume that wasn't hers. Lena's eyes flew open in the dark, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might wake him. She lay perfectly still, counting his breaths until they slowed into sleep. All the while, questions scorched her thoughts like acid. How long? How deep? How could I have missed this? At 3 a.m., she crept out of bed and into the bathroom, where she quietly emptied the little dinner she'd managed to keep down. Morning sickness, the books called it, though for her, it struck whenever it pleased. She rinsed her mouth and caught her reflection in the mirror. Pale, hollow-eyed, strands of hair slipping loose from her bun. She looked exactly like what she was. A woman watching her world shatter while fighting to pretend it was still whole. She slipped back under the covers, feeling the icy divide of sheets between them, wondering how long she could keep pretending. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, adding to the list she'd started 3 days ago. Baby due, around February. Tell Ethan when he's not busy. Research pediatricians. Buy prenatal vitamins. Find out who Cora West really is. The last item made her stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. And as Ethan shifted beside her, murmuring a name in his sleep that definitely wasn't hers, Lena knew she couldn't pretend anymore. Something was very, very wrong with her marriage, and she was going to find out exactly what. The truth has a cruel way of surfacing when you're least ready to face it. Lena learned that on a Thursday morning, when Ethan hopped into the shower, leaving his phone abandoned on the nightstand. That never happened. Usually, it might as well have been surgically attached to his hand. But today, he was in a rush, mumbling about an early strategy meeting with the team. The device buzzed with a new message. The preview lit up the lock screen. Cora, last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about. The words cut off, but Lena's vision tilted sideways. Her fingers moved on autopilot, muscle memory supplying Ethan's passcode, their wedding anniversary, a date that clearly meant more to her than to him. The full thread opened like a raw wound. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about what you said about leaving her. When are we going to stop pretending this is just work? Soon. She's been so clingy lately, always wanting to talk. You're like a breath of fresh air. I know exactly how to make you forget all about home. That black dress worked, didn't it? You have no idea what you do to me. At 24, you've got more fire than she's had in years. Lena's eyes burned as she scrolled higher. Weeks of messages she'd been too trusting to suspect. Late-night texts that had nothing to do with quarterly numbers. Selfies that had nothing to do with data reports. Dinner reservations, secret meetups, all without a single word about the wife waiting for him in their perfectly curated condo. Her favorite, if she could even call it that, was from 3 nights ago. Ethan told her I was working late again. She actually believed me. Cora, poor thing. But that's what happens when you let yourself go. I saw your wedding photo on your desk. She used to be pretty. What happened? Ethan, kids, work, life. She's always tired, always stressed. You make me feel alive again. The bathroom door handle turned, and every ounce of Lena's training as a designer, the ability to hide her emotions behind a polished presentation, snapped into place like armor. The part of Lena that knew how to solve problems under pressure snapped into place. She put Ethan's phone back exactly where she'd found it, arranged herself in the same position, and somehow managed to look convincingly asleep. When Ethan stepped out of the bathroom in a cloud of steam, he didn't even glance her way. "Morning, babe," he said, grabbing his phone off the nightstand. His thumb started scrolling immediately, and Lena watched his face light up at whatever Cora had just sent him. "Good morning," Lena whispered, her voice barely scraping out of her throat. He was already halfway to the closet, pulling out one of his perfectly tailored suits, the charcoal gray one that made his eyes look impossibly blue. "I'll be late tonight," he said, knotting his tie with practiced precision. Big pitch for the Griffin account. Cora's been putting in crazy hours on this one. Cora. Even now, saying her name brought out that specific grin. The one Lena hadn't seen aimed at her in months. Of course she has, Lena managed to say. If he heard the crack in her voice, he ignored it. He was too busy straightening his collar and smoothing invisible wrinkles. The same fastidious care he used to reserve for their dinner dates, back when she was still the center of his universe. After he left, planting a distracted kiss that barely grazed her cheek, Lena sat motionless on their bed. And then she crumbled. The sobs came from somewhere ancient and raw, the sound of a dream dying in real time. She was 8 weeks pregnant with the baby of a man who thought she was clueless and desperate, who compared her to a 24-year-old in tight black dresses, who spammed him with heart emojis, who laughed about her behind her back while destroying the vows she still clung to. The nausea hit viciously, forcing her to run to the bathroom, where she vomited until her stomach was hollow and her throat ached. When she finally raised her head, the reflection staring back didn't look like the woman she'd been a month ago. Hollow eyes, chalky skin, a shell. But as she stared, something inside her shifted. The heartbreak was still there, probably always would be, but beneath it, something harder was forming. Cold, clean anger that burned through the fog of disbelief. Ethan thought she was clueless. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. Lena walked back to the bedroom and flipped open her laptop. Her fingers moved with sharp, mechanical purpose across the keyboard. A quick search told her exactly who Cora West was. Graduated from Northwestern barely 3 months ago with a business degree. Her LinkedIn bragged about the analyst internship at Ethan's firm, her first and only real job. 24, fresh out of college and brazen enough to bulldoze a 7-year marriage for the thrill of it. Lena's phone buzzed with a text from her half-sister, Hannah, in Portland. "Hey sis, how are you? Feels like forever since we talked." For the first time in weeks, Lena actually smiled. Not the fake, brittle smile she'd worn like a shield, but something genuine, anchored by resolve. She typed back, "I need to ask you something. Would it be okay if I came to visit for a while? I need some space to think." Hannah's reply came instantly. "Of course. What's going on?" Lena stared at the blinking cursor, her thumb frozen over the keyboard. "How do you sum up the complete collapse of your life in one text?" "I'll explain when I get there." "Is next week too soon?" "Never too soon for family." "Drive safe," Hannah replied. Lena closed her phone, the decision hardening inside her like poured concrete. She wasn't going to confront Ethan. She wouldn't give him the chance to lie, to twist things, to make her doubt what her own eyes had proven. Instead, she was simply going to vanish. Let him stammer through excuses to his precious Cora. Let him figure out how to juggle his perfect double life without the clueless wife who'd been holding every piece together while he played boyfriend to an intern young enough to still show her college ID at bars. For the first time in months, Lena felt something like peace. She had 8 months to learn how to be a single mother, and she would use every single day to become the woman she should have been all along. The kind who never waits around for a man to remember she exists. But beneath the surge of calm, a faint panic simmered too, a small, ugly voice whispering, "What if I can't do this? What if I run out of money? What if he finds me and talks me into staying?" She squeezed her eyes shut until the doubts shrank back. No. She'd come this far. She wouldn't flinch now. She discovered that disappearing, truly disappearing, took more planning than designing an entire high-rise. Over the next 5 days, she moved through her routine like a ghost, quietly preparing to vanish. Each morning, she kissed Ethan goodbye as he hurried out, probably to meet Cora, then calmly dismantled the life they'd built together. She started with the practical steps, a discreet call to open a separate bank account Ethan couldn't touch, another to reroute her direct deposit from their joint checking into the new one. Her hands trembled as she signed the forms, but her voice stayed steady. "Just some account restructuring," she told the banker, a soft-spoken woman who seemed to understand more than Lena said out loud. Next came her clients. Lena drafted careful emails explaining she'd be taking an extended leave of absence for personal reasons, handing off her projects to trusted colleagues. She specifically entrusted the Griffin project, Ethan's prized deal, to a senior associate she knew would keep it afloat, but wouldn't owe Ethan any favors. The Griffin account, the one Ethan and Cora had supposedly closed together, would roll on just fine without her. The irony, it wasn't lost on Lena. The hardest part was deciding what to take. 7 years of marriage, reduced to 2 suitcases and a carry-on. She folded her clothes methodically, sorted by color and season. The ritual soothed her rattled nerves. The crisp blazers she wore to client meetings, the soft cardigans for late nights at her drafting table, the maternity clothes she'd secretly ordered online, tags still attached. Her iPad slid into her laptop bag alongside chargers and the stylus she used for sketching plans. The pregnancy books she'd been hiding under her side of the bed. The prenatal vitamins she'd been taking alone. She caught herself pausing more than once, clutching a sweater to her chest, fighting the whisper that maybe she was overreacting, that maybe if she stayed, she could fix this. But each time, she forced herself to fold the fabric and keep packing. She wouldn't look back. Not this time. The wedding album stayed. So did the framed photos from their honeymoon in Napa, their anniversary dinners, the picture-perfect moments that had disguised the rot underneath. On Tuesday night, while Ethan showered after yet another late work night, Lena sat at the kitchen island drafting the letter she'd leave behind. She wrote 17 versions before settling on one that said just enough. Ethan, I know about Cora. I know everything. I need time to think about our future, and I can't do that here. Don't look for me. When I'm ready, I'll reach out. Lena. She sealed it in an envelope and placed it on his nightstand, right where he'd find it, after she was long gone. Wednesday morning dawned gray and drizzly, classic Chicago weather that suited her mood perfectly. Ethan left at his usual time, phone pressed to his ear, already rattling off quarterly projections to someone. Not Cora, at least not yet. The day was still young. Lena waited 30 minutes after he left, then called an Uber. As the driver loaded her bags into the trunk, she stood on the curb for a moment, staring up at their building. 43 stories of steel and glass, their condo perched high on the 38th floor. She'd once loved the view. The city unfurled below them like an endless promise. Now, it just looked cold. The drive to Portland took 4 hours with one quick stop for gas and crackers to settle her queasy stomach. Lena spent most of the ride gazing out the window, watching the scenery shift from crowded city blocks to soft, rolling hills, and finally, to the quiet, tree-lined streets of her sister's neighborhood. Hannah lived in a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in the Selwood district, a sunny yellow house with white trim, a tiny front yard, and a garden that looked like someone loved it enough to pull every weed by hand. It was the kind of house you'd see in a feel-good movie about fresh starts. Jesus, Lena, Hannah blurted, throwing the door wide open before the Uber even pulled away. You look like hell. It was exactly what Lena needed to hear. Honest, blunt, no careful tiptoeing like everyone else seemed to think she needed. Hannah had always been straightforward, a trait that used to annoy Lena when they were younger, but now felt like a lifeline thrown just in time. I feel like hell, Lena admitted, melting into her sister's fierce hug. Hannah was everything Lena wasn't. Curvy where Lena was lean, olive-skinned where Lena was fair, effortlessly casual in jeans and a flannel that looked Pinterest perfect without even trying. At 38, Hannah radiated the calm confidence of a woman who'd survived her own heartbreaks and come out tougher on the other side. Come on, Hannah said, grabbing one of Lena's suitcases. Coffee first, then we'll unpack your drama. The house smelled like vanilla candles and leftover toast. Real butter, not the organic spread Ethan insisted on. Hannah's kitchen was small but warm, cluttered with mismatched mugs and a coffee maker that looked older than Lena's entire marriage. Fair warning, Hannah said, pouring coffee into chipped mugs. I have exactly 0 patience for men who don't know what they've got. So if you're here to plan how to win back some loser who doesn't deserve you, we're gonna have problems. Lena wrapped her hands around the mug, breathing in the comforting scent that, miraculously, didn't make her nauseous for once. I'm not here to win anyone back. Good. Now tell me what that husband of yours did to make you pack up and run. So Lena told her everything. The widening gulf between them, like a hairline crack that had turned into a canyon. The late nights and flimsy excuses. The Instagram account, the gut punch messages, the pregnancy she'd discovered alone and was now facing the same way. Hannah didn't interrupt once. By the time Lena finished, her sister's expression was thundercloud dark. 24 years old, Hannah said finally, shaking her head. Christ, men really are the dumbest creatures alive, huh? The worst part is how stupid I feel, Lena confessed, voice trembling. All the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Honey, that's not stupid. That's called being in love. Hannah's tone softened, her hand covering Lena's. But now you know. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Lena could answer, her phone buzzed on the table. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, followed immediately by a text. Then another call. Another message. He found your note, Hannah said dryly. Lena stared at the phone lighting up with Ethan's frantic attempts to reach her. She could practically see him standing in their pristine bedroom, letter clutched in one hand, probably calling her from the same spot where he'd been whispering secrets to Cora about leaving her. The irony almost made her laugh. Let it ring, Hannah said firmly. Trust me, panic looks good on cheating husbands. So Lena did. She sat at her sister's kitchen table, drinking coffee that tasted like safety, while her phone blew up with proof of Ethan's unraveling calm. Somewhere back in Chicago, a man who had always believed he was in control was finally learning what it felt like to be ignored. Ethan James Harper had built an entire career on managing variables, predicting outcomes, never being blindsided. But now, standing alone in their pristine bedroom at 7:47 p.m., holding Lena's letter with trembling fingers, he realized none of his carefully crafted strategies mattered when your wife simply vanished. I know about Cora. I know everything. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. His knees buckled, and he dropped onto the bed they'd shared for 7 years. The letter slipped through his numb fingers, landing softly on the rug. How long had she known? His mind raced backward through every half-baked excuse, every late night, every lie. Had Lena seemed different? Quieter? He strained to remember their last real conversation, but came up empty. When was the last time he'd actually looked at her, really seen her, instead of scrolling through Cora's texts? His smartwatch vibrated with a new message from Cora. Can't wait for dinner tomorrow night. That new place downtown is supposed to be amazing. Ethan stared at the screen, his stomach twisting. Barely an hour ago, he'd felt a flicker of excitement about that dinner. Now, Cora's bright, eager grin made him feel sick. He called Lena's number, his hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped the phone. Straight to voicemail. Lena, please, we need to talk about this. Just call me back, okay? Whatever you think you know, we can fix it. I love you. The words tasted hollow, even to him. When was the last time I told her that and actually meant it? He wondered. When was the last time he said it without another tab open in his mind, without a phone in his other hand, without planning the next meeting, the next email, the next stolen moment with Cora? He called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Each time, it picked up after a single ring, the unmistakable sign she was declining on purpose. Panic constricted his chest as he began tearing through the condo, room by room, searching for some sign of where she'd gone, desperate to find the one thing he could no longer control. Her side of the closet was half empty now. Obvious gaps where her favorite dresses and sweaters used to hang. The bathroom counter, usually crowded with her skincare bottles and the prenatal vitamins she'd just started taking, was stripped bare except for his things. In the kitchen, he yanked open the junk drawer where they kept passports and important papers. Her passport was gone, so were her birth certificate and social security card. This wasn't some impulsive storm out. This was a carefully planned escape. Ethan's hands trembled as he scrolled through his contacts, searching for anyone who might know where she'd gone. The realization sank in like lead. He couldn't remember the last time Lena had mentioned a friend or family. When did I stop listening? When did her voice become background noise to my ambition? He dug up Hannah's number from Lena's old phone backups, her half-sister in Portland. He'd only met her twice, once at the wedding and again at Christmas 3 years ago. Hannah had never been impressed with him, called him golden boy with a sarcastic edge that stung more than he admitted. The call went straight to voicemail. Hannah, this is Ethan, Lena's husband. We had a misunderstanding, and I think she might have gone to you. Please, just have her call me. We need to work this out. A misunderstanding. Even now, he dressed it up in business terms, like the slow destruction of a marriage could be fixed with a bullet point in a presentation. By 11 that night, after 6 more unanswered calls and increasingly frantic voicemails, Ethan found himself standing in his dark office, staring at the Instagram messages that had started it all. The chat thread with Cora was still open on his phone. Her latest message, sent just 20 minutes ago, was a photo of her in tight workout leggings at the gym. Getting strong for my man. Miss you already. 3 months ago, that photo would have made him grin. Now it made him want to smash his phone to pieces. What the hell have I done? Yes, Cora was stunning, young, vibrant, hungry for the world, a mirror of the reckless ambition he once had. But she was also just that, a fantasy. A shiny distraction from the real, imperfect, steady love Lena had given him for 7 years, while he chased deals and quarterly bonuses. His phone buzzed. A jolt of hope shot through his chest until he saw the caller ID. Cora. Hey, handsome, she purred when he answered. Her voice dripped with promise. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, wondering how the hell he'd gotten here, alone in a beautiful condo with no wife, no family, and a hollow echo of a life he'd once thought was perfect. I know you said we shouldn't talk tonight, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. Want to come over? I made that pasta you like. Ethan closed his eyes as Cora's voice played back in his head, for once hearing it clearly, the careful sweetness, the perfectly chosen words that always made him feel wanted, special, young. Had any of it been real? I can't, he said quietly into the phone. Something's come up, work stuff. Oh, I don't mind waiting. Her tone turned coy. I could help you unwind when you're done. Cora, I need to ask you something. His voice was steadier than his hands. Why are you really interested in me? A beat of silence, then a laugh. Not the playful giggle he was used to, but something sharper, almost cold. What kind of question is that? I care about you, Ethan. You're brilliant, successful, and married. The dismissiveness in her tone made his stomach twist. You said yourself, your wife doesn't get you. She's just holding you back from your real potential. Had he really said that? The words felt like acid in his mouth now, but the memory was there, blurred by wine and the intoxicating feeling of being admired by someone who knew exactly how to stoke his ego. I have to go. Ethan? What's wrong? You're acting weird. He hung up without answering, blocked her number before he could talk himself out of it. It was a tiny act, maybe too late to matter, but it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in months. The condo felt cavernous and hollow around him now. Every corner whispered of Lena, her laptop bag by the front door, the coffee mug she'd forgotten to rinse that morning, the scattered sketches on her desk in the spare bedroom. He stepped into that room, really saw it for the first time in ages. The walls were covered with her work, graceful, human-centered blueprints of homes that promised warmth instead of showy status. In the corner, a small stack of books caught his eye. What to expect when you're expecting. The First 40 Days. Pregnancy for Dummies. The titles slammed into him like a punch to the chest. He sank into her chair, staring at the proof of a secret she'd carried alone, while he'd been playing out some cheap fantasy with a 24-year-old who saw him as nothing more than a rung on her career ladder. Lena was pregnant. His wife was having his child. And instead of standing beside her, he'd been plotting to leave her for someone who never even wanted him. Just what he could offer. Ethan buried his face in his hands, and, for the first time since his father's funeral 15 years ago, he cried. Raw, wrenching sobs that bounced off the polished walls of their perfect, empty home. Outside, Chicago glittered under its indifferent night sky. Inside, the man who'd always believed he had it all realized too late that he'd thrown away the only thing that truly mattered. The condo, that polished cage he'd once been so proud of, held the echo of a man who finally understood exactly what he'd thrown away. The real question was, would understanding be enough to win it back? 3 weeks in Portland had taught Lena that healing wasn't linear, pretty, or easy to measure. Some mornings she woke up in Hannah's guest room feeling strong, almost peaceful, sketching new design ideas on her iPad while sipping ginger tea that, mercifully, stayed down. Other days, she couldn't force herself out of bed until noon, her body racked with morning sickness that felt more like mourning than pregnancy symptoms. "It's normal," Hannah promised her on the worst days, setting down toast cut into careful little triangles, the only thing Lena could reliably keep down. "Your whole world just blew up. Let yourself be a mess for a while." Hannah's house had become a safe harbor of mismatched furniture and messy honesty. Unlike the sterile perfection of the Chicago condo, every inch here told a story. Water rings on the old coffee table, a throw pillow repaired with a crooked stitch, crayon drawings taped proudly to the fridge, thank you gifts from the neighbor kids Hannah babysat after school. "I was married too," Hannah had confessed during their first long, tear-soaked talk, both curled up on the couch with mugs of strong coffee. "Marcus cheated with his secretary. Total cliché." I almost laughed. Almost. "What happened?" Lena had whispered. "I fought for him. Therapy, forgiveness, being the cool wife who gets that men slip up. Forgave him when he swore it'd never happen again." Hannah's tone stayed calm, but her knuckles whitened around her mug. "Then I found out about secretary number 2 and 3. Turns out, some people don't want to be saved from themselves." Lena had stored that confession like a caution sign, stacking it alongside all the new, brutal truths she was collecting about love, betrayal, and the thin line between devotion and habit. And late at night, when the house creaked and the baby turned somersaults inside her, she still caught herself wondering, if he showed up now, crying, begging, would I be strong enough to say no? The question shamed her more than the betrayal itself. Her phone had finally stopped vibrating with Ethan's desperate calls and messages. 47 missed calls the first week. 23 the second. Then, nothing. "The silence is worse than the noise was," she'd told Hannah just yesterday, while they painted the guest room a soft yellow, neutral and hopeful. "Or," Hannah had grunted, rolling more paint onto her brush with deliberate force, "he got distracted again by his baby-faced side piece." Lena didn't disagree. Men like him don't stay single long. They need someone to handle their feelings for them. Hannah's comment had stung, mostly because Lena knew it was true. How many of Ethan's moods had she managed over the years? How many times had she swallowed her own needs to cushion his stress, his schedule, his towering ambitions? Now, sitting alone in a coffee shop in the Hawthorne district, Lena was finally learning how to manage just one person's feelings, her own. She'd settled into a daily rhythm that mostly worked. Breakfast, if her stomach could stand it. A walk through the neighborhood's leafy streets. Then 2 hours of sketching at this cafe, where the baristas already knew her order, herbal tea and a blueberry muffin, and respected her need for silence. Her sketches had shifted since leaving Chicago. Gone were the sleek, sterile glass towers her old firm loved so much. Now her pages filled with houses, wraparound porches, sunny breakfast nooks, reading corners. Places built for families who actually sat down together. Homes where kids could leave toy trucks in the hallway without someone complaining about ruining the aesthetic. "Excuse me, are you an architect?" Lena looked up, startled, to find a woman about her age standing beside the table, pointing at the spread of pencil lines and notes. She had warm brown eyes and wore jeans splattered with dried paint, definitely an artist of some sort. "I am," Lena said cautiously. She wasn't used to strangers asking about her work. Not here, not now. "I'm Indy Morrison," the woman said, extending a hand and a smile. "I run a nonprofit that builds affordable housing for single moms." She gestured at the sketch in front of Lena, a simple, welcoming 2-bedroom with big windows and an open floor plan. "That design is exactly what we need. Would you maybe want to hear about a project I'm working on?" For the first time in months, Lena felt something stir in her chest that wasn't dread or queasiness. It was interest, genuine curiosity, a flicker of purpose. "Tell me more," she said. Indy slid into the seat across from her, eyes bright as she outlined her vision. 30 small homes for women starting over, dignified spaces that were both affordable and beautiful. "Most low-income housing is just plain depressing," Indy said. "Like if you're poor, you don't deserve a place that makes you feel proud to come home. We want to change that." The conversation stretched into 2 hours. By the end, Lena had filled 3 pages with rough sketches before she and Indy agreed she'd meet the project team next week. Walking home through Hannah's neighborhood, she caught herself grinning, truly grinning. For the first time since finding those awful messages, her hand drifted to her belly, where a tiny bump was just starting to show beneath her loose sweaters. "Hey baby," she murmured. "Mommy might have found us something good." The little yellow house smelled like dinner when she pushed open the door, garlic and herbs, warm and comforting, making her stomach growl instead of revolt. Hannah stood at the stove, swaying a little to music playing off her phone as she stirred a pot of something delicious. "Good day?" Hannah asked without turning around. "Actually, yeah?" Lena settled into a chair at the kitchen table, already pulling out her iPad. "I think I found a job. A real one. Not just a paycheck. Something real." Hannah wiped her hands on a dish towel and studied Lena's sketches, giving them the same careful attention she gave everything that mattered. "These are gorgeous, Lena. Truly. When's the last time your work made you feel this excited?" Lena paused. Back in Chicago, architecture had become about deadlines and office politics, landing big clients and eyeing the next promotion. When had she last thought about the people who would live in the buildings she designed? "I don't even remember," she admitted. Hannah reached out, squeezing her wrist gently. "Then maybe this isn't just about running away from Ethan. Maybe it's about running towards something better." That night, Lena lay in bed listening to Portland's softer nighttime hum, so different from Chicago's restless downtown noise. Her phone rested silent on the nightstand for the first time in weeks. No more desperate voicemails. No more texts full of hollow apologies and empty promises to change. The quiet should have brought her peace. Instead, it left a question echoing in her mind. Had he really given up so easily? Or had he just slipped right back into someone else's arms, the way he always had? She pushed the thought aside and forced herself to focus on what was true. Today had been a good day. The baby seemed calmer, settling into a rhythm that didn't knock her flat with nausea every hour. The housing project offered the chance to create something meaningful, something built for people like her. Women rebuilding from nothing. Hannah's spare room was starting to feel less like a refuge and more like a home. For the first time since her world imploded, Lena let herself picture a future that didn't depend on fixing the mess Ethan had made. A future she would design herself, sturdy, honest, real. A life that traded perfection for substance, appearances for authenticity. A radical idea for a woman who'd spent 7 years molding herself into the wife her husband thought he wanted. Instead of the version of herself she'd spent years performing for other people, Lena drifted off to sleep that night, with one hand resting protectively on her growing belly. And for the first time, she felt ready to discover who she really might be. Cora West had always excelled at reading people and giving them exactly what they wanted to hear. It was how she'd coasted through college on scholarships and landed an analyst internship at one of Chicago's top consulting firms. But standing in Ethan's glass-walled office on a Tuesday morning, watching him stare pointedly past her shoulder while reciting what was clearly a rehearsed speech, she realized her calculations might have been off this time. "The internship program is being restructured," Ethan said, drumming his fingers on the desk. That same anxious rhythm she'd noticed more and more over the past month. "We're pivoting to prioritize candidates with more specialized experience." Cora adjusted her fitted black blazer, the one that used to draw that hungry look from him just weeks ago, and offered him a practiced, saccharine smile that had undone stronger men than him. "Ethan, if this is about your wife, we can work around it. I get it. Married men have to be discreet." For the first time, he met her eyes. What she saw there wasn't lust or shame or even anger. It was something worse. Cold indifference. "This isn't about my wife," he said quietly. "This is about professionalism and the fact that I made a serious error in judgment that could have jeopardized both our careers." A flicker of panic tightened Cora's chest. She'd been so methodical, so strategic. Ethan was supposed to be her shortcut to investors, a fast-track recommendation for a permanent hire, maybe even connections that could lead to real money and influence. She had invested 3 months in him. She wasn't about to lose it all because he'd suddenly grown a conscience. For a split second, her polished confidence buckled, replaced by a raw surge of fear. What if he cuts me loose and I have nothing? What if every whispered promise was just another lie? She forced the dread down and let anger fill its place. "You don't mean that," she said, stepping closer to his desk. "I know you feel something real for me. You told me I made you feel alive again, remember? You said your wife didn't get you like I do." Ethan flinched as those words, his own careless confessions, came back at him like knives. "I was wrong to say those things," he muttered. "I was wrong about everything." "Oh, was the sex wrong too?" Cora shot back, her sweetness gone, swapping subtlety for blunt force. "Because you didn't exactly look conflicted then." The color drained from Ethan's face. "Keep your voice down." "Or what? You'll fire me?" She laughed, but it sounded like broken glass. "Too late, sweetheart. I have screenshots of every text you ever sent me, every late-night promise to leave your boring wife, every photo you begged for, every plan you swore we'd make real, your precious investor contacts, your big career favors. Remember all that?" She crossed her arms, watching his composure crack one trembling breath at a time. Now she had his full attention. The nervous tapping of his fingers stopped, and his expression shifted. Gone was the embarrassed guilt, replaced by the cold, strategic calculation she'd seen him wield in high-stakes meetings. "Are you threatening me, Cora?" "I'm protecting myself," she shot back smoothly. "Let's not rewrite history. You were the one who started flirting during those late strategy sessions. You suggested the first round of drinks after work. You swore your marriage was dead and buried anyway. It was true, mostly. Sure, she'd leaned in, played up the interest, but Ethan had crossed the line first. The wedding band still snug on his finger was proof of who'd betrayed whom. "What do you want?" he asked finally, his voice tight. "I want what you promised," Cora said without missing a beat. "A permanent position, not just this flimsy internship. And your connections, the Griffin account team, an intro to the Morrison Project people, your personal recommendation on record. You owe me that much." Ethan went silent, and Cora could practically see the gears grinding behind his eyes, calculating risk, weighing damage control against the cost of silence. She knew the game well enough. An exposed affair would shred his reputation far worse than hers. She was young, could spin herself as the ambitious intern caught up in her married boss's manipulations. He was the senior executive with everything to lose. "Fine," he said at last, voice flat. "I'll make the calls, but after that we're done, completely done." Cora's smile was no longer sweet, it was sharp and utterly unmasked. "Deal?" She turned to leave but paused when he called her name. "Cora, what we had, did it ever mean anything to you?" She stopped at the door, weighing whether to lie or tell the truth. Ethan wasn't a bad man exactly. He was charming, successful, and in the beginning he'd even been gentle. In another life, without ulterior motives, she might have genuinely liked him. But this wasn't another life. "It meant job security," she said plainly. "Thanks for the reference letters." After she walked out, Ethan sank back into his chair, alone in the echoing hush of his office. His eyes drifted to the framed photo on his desk. A wedding snapshot from the day he and Lena had looked at each other like they were the luckiest people alive. He'd turned that photo face down weeks ago, unable to meet her eyes, even in a picture. Now he turned the photo back upright, forcing himself to look at it, at her. Lena's face on their wedding day glowed with a kind of joy and trust he'd spent 7 years nurturing, and only 3 reckless months tearing apart. His phone buzzed, jolting him. A text from an unfamiliar number. "Hope your wife enjoys the screenshots I'm about to send her." The blood in Ethan's veins turned to ice. He'd given Cora exactly what she demanded. The job, the recommendations, the introductions. But apparently that wasn't enough. She wanted to torch whatever scraps of his marriage still survived, either out of spite or to keep him too terrified to retaliate. He dialed the number immediately, but it went straight to a generic disconnected recording. He jumped to Instagram, then LinkedIn, then her company email. Gone. Cora West had vanished like a ghost, with everything she needed to burn him to the ground if she felt like it. Ethan grabbed his keys with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. He had to get to Portland before Cora's poison reached Lena. He had to explain, to beg, to somehow convince his wife that what they'd built was still worth saving, even if every screenshot proved he didn't deserve it. As he barreled through Chicago traffic, blowing past speed limits and caution signs, dread gnawed at his ribs like an animal. Deep down, he knew he was already too late. The woman he'd married, the one who'd believed in him even when he gave her nothing in return, she was a mirage he'd squandered. Now the truth was reclaiming everything he'd pretended was safe. Back in the glass tower he'd abandoned, Cora West cleared out her desk with practiced ease, already drafting the LinkedIn post that would frame her exit as a brilliant career pivot, not the ruthless con it really was. She'd learned early that in a world run by men who confused lust for love, a young woman with enough beauty and cold ambition could write her own ticket. Ethan had been almost too easy. Married men always were. So much to lose. So easy to leverage. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Lena sat cross-legged on Hannah's couch, sketching a kitchen layout for the nonprofit housing project. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Notification, one new message from unknown number. She glanced at the preview, thought you should see what your husband really thinks. Her pencil froze mid-stroke. For 6 weeks, her phone had been blissfully silent. No more desperate voicemails, no more apologetic texts. She'd even let herself believe maybe Ethan had finally let go. Maybe he'd settled for Cora and left her alone to rebuild what he'd broken. The screenshot that loaded next shattered that fragile hope in a single line. Ethan. Lena's been so clingy lately, always wanting to talk and connect and have these deep, exhausting conversations. Lena stared at the words, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. So this was the man she'd wasted 7 years loving. Sometimes I think she's just desperate to keep me interested. Cora. Poor baby. Good thing you have me to remind you what real passion feels like. Ethan. She's gained weight too. Keep saying it's stress, but I remember when she used to take care of herself. Lena's vision blurred as more screenshots kept loading. Each one another slice across already raw skin. Messages mocking her boring friends, her predictable routines, her need for real connection. Photos. God, the photos. Ethan had sent Cora snapshots of their bedroom, their kitchen, even the wedding album she'd left behind in Chicago, all with cruel little comments attached. Ethan. Look at this one from our honeymoon. She was actually pretty back then. What happened? Life happened, baby. But you don't have to settle for less than you deserve. The last screenshot was dated just 2 days ago. Hope your wife loves reading these. Consider it my going-away present for your marriage. Lena dropped her phone like it had burned her. The hum of the coffee shop, baristas calling orders, spoons clinking against mugs, melted into a high-pitched static in her ears. She pressed both hands to her now noticeably rounded belly and forced herself to breathe past the nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. He'd laughed about their private moments, shared photos of their home, mocked her body, her life, the very core of who she was. All for the amusement of a girl who'd seen their marriage as sport. Ma'am? Are you okay? The barista who'd learned her tea order weeks ago stood by her table, worry creasing his forehead. Lena managed a stiff nod, even though she felt like she might collapse. I'm okay. Just need some air. She gathered her scattered sketches and phone with shaking hands, stepped outside, and let Portland's crisp October air slap her awake. The tree-lined street she'd come to love suddenly looked sinister, like Cora's words had poisoned her little sanctuary too. Her phone rang in her palm. Hannah. Hey, you need to get home right now, Hannah said, her voice sharp with urgency. Your husband is here. What? Lena's knees almost gave out on the sidewalk. How did he? I don't know, but he's pacing my yard like a lunatic. The neighbors are staring. He keeps saying he needs to talk to you about some messages. I think he knows about the screenshots. Lena closed her eyes, steadying her breath. 6 weeks of hard-won strength. 6 weeks of finding herself again. Through work that mattered, late-night talks with Hannah, and the quiet pride of surviving on her own. She exhaled once, slowly, then opened her eyes to the bright, cold street. I'm on my way. The walk back to Hannah's house took 12 minutes, and Lena used every single step to fortify herself against whatever excuses Ethan would throw at her. He'd had 6 weeks to own his choices, to reach out honestly, to face her like a man. But he hadn't lifted a finger, until Cora threatened to blow up the last scraps of his reputation. She spotted him before she turned onto Hannah's street. a tall figure in a tailored suit, pacing frantically beside a sleek black sedan that looked absurdly out of place on this quiet block of modest bungalows and flower beds. Even from down the street, she could see the restless twitch of his hands, the way he gestured wildly into his phone. When he saw her, he cut the call mid-sentence. For a long second, they just stared at each other across Hannah's small front lawn. 7 years of marriage, shrinking down to the empty space between two strangers. "Lena," her name cracked out of him like a prayer. "Thank God you're here. I can explain everything." "Can you?" she asked, stopping just out of reach. She took him in with a strange detachment, the suit that hung a little looser than before, the deep hollows under eyes that had once seemed so confident, the hair mussed by restless fingers. "The messages Cora sent you, half of it's twisted." She spun things, cut conversations out of context. "Which half, Ethan?" Lena's voice was calm, terrifyingly calm even to her own ears. "The half where you called me needy and boring? Or the half where you sent your mistress pictures of our bedroom?" Ethan flinched like she'd slapped him. "I was angry, confused. I said things I didn't mean because I was trying to convince myself what I was doing wasn't so." "You spent 3 months convincing yourself," Lena cut in, her pulse steady even as her heart roared in her chest. There was something clean and sharp forming inside her. Not grief this time, but finality. "How long did you need to convince yourself to send her photos of our wedding album? How many nights did it take to laugh about our vows with a 24-year-old intern?" "She manipulated me," Ethan said hoarsely, stepping forward like he might grab her hands. "You have to believe me. She used me for connections, for leverage. None of it was real. Our marriage was real." Lena's voice was quiet but diamond-hard. "I was real. And you threw it away for someone who didn't even pretend to care about you the moment it stopped benefiting her." "What does that say, Ethan? About how little you valued what we had?" He stepped closer, and Lena could see the tears collecting in his tired eyes. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you in ways that, God, Lena, I can't even sleep anymore. I keep seeing you pregnant and alone, and I—" "Stop." The word cracked through the cool night air like a blade. "You don't get to use my pregnancy to make yourself feel sorry for what you did. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it?" Her hand moved instinctively over her rounded belly, a gesture that was hers alone now, no longer shared with him. "For 7 years, I tried to be the wife you wanted. I handled your moods, organized your life, pretended not to notice when you stopped seeing me and started seeing an accessory that got in your way. And the second I needed you to be my partner, not a burden, you found someone else to make you feel young." "I want to come home." Ethan's voice broke. "I want to fix this, I swear." "Home to what?" Lena demanded. "To that condo where you invited another woman's fantasy into our bedroom? To a life where I lie awake wondering if every word out of your mouth is just what you think I want to hear." Behind him, Hannah stepped onto the porch, a coffee mug in hand, watchful and ready to pull Lena back if she needed rescuing. She met Lena's eyes and nodded once, a silent promise that she wasn't alone this time. "I love you," Ethan said hoarsely, his shoulders slumping. "I know I don't deserve it, but I do. I love you." Lena really looked at him then, saw not the man she'd loved, but the reality beneath. A man who mistook possession for partnership, loyalty for convenience, and only recognized value when he feared losing it. "I loved you too," she said quietly. "But love isn't magic, Ethan. It can't glue together what you smashed apart." She turned toward Hannah's porch, where warm lamplight spilled through the windows, light that had taught her that home wasn't a fancy skyline apartment. It was any place where you were free to be whole. "Lena, wait!" His voice cracked with raw panic. "The baby." She paused, her back still to him. "The baby will be fine. We will be fine." "I want to be involved. I want to be a father." "Then be one," she said simply. "But you don't get to be my husband anymore." She didn't look back as she climbed the steps to Hannah's front door. For the first time in months, Lena felt a quiet inside her that wasn't the numb hush of denial, but the deep, enduring calm of having spoken the truth. Finally, and completely. 3 months later, Lena stood at the head of a bright conference room at Morrison & Associates, her old firm's biggest rival, presenting the final plans for the affordable housing project that had changed everything. Her pregnancy was impossible to hide now, a beautiful, undeniable curve beneath the navy blue maternity blazer she wore like armor. Across the polished table sat 5 attentive executives, including James Morrison himself. In the corner, Indy Morrison, James's daughter, the nonprofit director who'd first found Lena sketching in that Portland coffee shop, took rapid notes, her excitement hard to contain. The modular design maximizes efficiency while preserving each home's unique character, Lena explained, her voice calm, unwavering. Each unit can be customized to the family's needs without driving up construction costs. Her iPad displayed the polished digital renderings she'd perfected in sleepless nights, fueled by peppermint tea and sheer determination. These weren't just buildings. They were safe harbors, homes, crafted with warmth and intention, for women like her. Women rebuilding, women daring to believe they deserved more than just shelter. They deserved a future built on truth, substance, and love. And this time, Lena was building it for herself. "The numbers are impressive," Morrison Sr. said, pushing his reading glasses higher on the bridge of his nose. "But I have to ask, why should Morrison and Associates take on a project that frankly won't turn much of a profit?" Lena had anticipated this question. She'd rehearsed the answer in her mind through sleepless nights and long walks around Portland blocks. "Because sometimes the most valuable projects aren't measured in profit margins," she said evenly. "They're measured in families given a fresh start, communities built where none existed, and in knowing that when you look back at your body of work, you can say you made the world a little bit better than you found it." The room fell silent. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's glittering skyline stretched toward the sound. The same skyline she'd once gazed at from an office that hadn't deserved her. Somewhere out there, her old life carried on without her, and for the first time she didn't miss it at all. "There's something else," Indy piped up, sliding a tablet across the glossy conference table to her father. "Patterson and Associates submitted a competing proposal for the same contract. I think you'll want to see who their lead architect is." Morrison Sr. frowned as he scanned the screen. "Ethan Harper? Isn't he consulting now, not design?" "He transferred over about 6 weeks ago," Indy explained, her voice matter-of-fact but edged with quiet loyalty. "Word is his consulting rep took a hit after some personal complications." Lena's hand tightened around her stylus, though her expression stayed neutral. She'd braced herself for this. Of course, Ethan would claw for relevance in the fastest, cheapest way possible, by cannibalizing her ideas. For a breath, a phantom panic pricked at her ribs, that old, familiar dread. What if they believe him instead of me? What if history repeats? But then she exhaled and remembered who she was now, not the woman who waited for permission, but the woman who built her own doors and walked through them. "Show me," Morrison Sr. murmured. The competing design flickered to life on the big wall monitor. Lena recognized her own architectural DNA in every line. The open floor plan she'd fine-tuned, the light-maximizing layouts she'd championed, the carefully chosen sustainable materials she'd sourced herself. But where her blueprints felt alive, warm, humane, Ethan's version looked like a soulless prototype. Heart stripped out and replaced with cost-cutting precision. "Well," Morrison Sr. said dryly, eyebrows raised, "that does look familiar." "There's more," Indy said, and Lena felt a rush of gratitude for the woman who'd turned from stranger to fierce ally in just a few months. Ethan Harper is currently under informal investigation at his old firm. An intern named Cora West is making, well, let's say interesting claims about his professional conduct. The tablet made its way around the table. Lena didn't bother reading it herself. She didn't need to know how deep Cora's scorched-earth tactics had cut Ethan's reputation. She could read it in the way the executives' faces hardened. "Miss Harper," Morrison Sr. said at last, lifting his eyes from the tablet to meet hers squarely. "Your proposal is approved. We start construction next month." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of congratulations and firm handshakes. Lena heard the words, nodded politely, but her pulse was hammering too loudly to really register them. She'd done it. Against every reason to fail, carrying her baby alone, rebuilding her career from zero, standing firm when her past tried to drag her backward. She'd done it. Outside the tall glass walls, Seattle gleamed. But for once, all the brightness Lena needed lived in the quiet certainty beneath her hand, resting on the curve of her belly and the future she was building for both of them, all on her own terms. As the executives filed out, Indy lingered near the door with her father, then turned back to Lena. "There's one more thing you should know," she said quietly. "Patterson and Associates fired Ethan Harper this morning. Apparently, the whole Cora West situation blew up into a full-on lawsuit: sexual harassment, misuse of company resources, breach of professional conduct. His career here in Chicago is, well, it's over." Lena let the news wash over her without triumph or spite. There was no real satisfaction in it, only a faint, distant sadness for the man who had once dreamed beside her and who'd ruined himself trying to feel young again. "And Cora?" she asked. "Blacklisted," Morrison Sr. answered bluntly. "She tried to leverage one affair into multiple promotions. It blew up in her face." Word travels fast in this industry, especially about young professionals who think seduction is a shortcut to success. 3 hours later, Lena sat at Hannah's kitchen table, still glowing with the quiet thrill of victory. They celebrated with sparkling apple cider and greasy takeout Chinese, the kind of food Ethan would have sniffed at like it was poison. Hannah raised her glass with a grin. "To my brilliant sister, who turned a cheating husband into the foundation of her dream career." "To second chances," Lena corrected softly, tapping her glass against Hannah's, "and to knowing exactly when the first chance is over." Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. "Heard about your big win. Congratulations. You always were the talented one in our marriage." Lena read it twice, her face impassive. Then she deleted it without replying. Some conversations deserved to stay buried in the past, and Ethan James Harper was now just that: history. That evening, as Portland's autumn rain tapped softly against the windows, Lena knelt on the floor of what had become her permanent room in Hannah's house, fitting the last pieces of a new white crib together. Each piece clicked into place with satisfying finality, like the fresh life she was constructing one solid choice at a time. Her phone rang, a FaceTime call from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a warm, familiar smile greeted her. "Dr. Amalfi from the prenatal clinic." "Hi, Lena. I have the results from your latest ultrasound," the doctor said, her voice kind and bright. "Everything looks perfect. And are you ready to know your baby's stats?" "Absolutely," Lena said, breath-catching. "It's a girl." Dr. Amalfi's smile widened. "Your daughter is growing strong and beautifully. She's healthy and on track in every way." "Daughter." The word cracked something open in Lena's chest, like sunlight breaking through a storm. She was having a daughter. A little girl who would grow up knowing that strength didn't come from someone else's permission, but from within. That rebuilding was possible. That the right choice wasn't always easy, but it was always hers to make. "I'm ready," Lena whispered, one hand pressed protectively over the curve of her belly, where her daughter waited, fierce and steady as her mother's new life. Just like her mother. Outside, the lights of Seattle glittered on the horizon, but inside Hannah's cheerful yellow house, a new future was unfolding. One quiet, brave decision at a time. And for the first time in months, Lena knew with absolute certainty that she and her daughter weren't just going to be fine. They were going to be extraordinary. 1 year later, the first thing people noticed about Lena's new office wasn't the prime downtown Portland address or the sleek row of architectural awards she'd racked up in only 12 months. It was the sunny corner where her minimalist glass desk met a colorful play area. Building blocks, picture books, and a baby monitor softly crackling with the gentle hum of nap time. Lena Grace Harper, or rather, Lena Grace Harper, no longer. She'd dropped her married name 6 months ago and gone back to her maiden name, Lena Grace Mitchell. She was deep into blueprints for her third major affordable housing development when the monitor buzzed alive with cheerful babbling. "Mama, Mama, Mama!" came the bright little voice of 8-month-old Lena Grace Mitchell, who had inherited her mother's green eyes and unstoppable stubborn streak, but somehow skipped the anxiety altogether. "Someone's awake right on schedule," Indy Morrison remarked from the other side of Lena's desk, where they'd been finalizing expansion plans. Under Lena's leadership, Morrison and Associates had launched an entire division devoted to community-first design and appointed her as its director. Lena smiled, saving her drafts and pushing to her feet. Perfect timing, as always. She stepped into the small adjoining room that doubled as Luna's daytime nursery. The sight never failed to steal her breath. Luna sitting up in her portable crib, dimpled arms reaching for the sunbeams pouring through the big windows, babbling at dust motes as if they were fairies. "Hello, beautiful girl," Lena whispered, scooping her daughter up into her arms. Luna immediately reached for Lena's earrings, delicate architectural-inspired studs that Hannah had had custom-made for her last birthday. "Mama," Luna announced proudly, as though she'd just cracked the code for world peace. "That's right, my sweet pea. Mama's here." Beyond the glass, Portland sprawled in all its quirky creative glory. Once, Lena had thought losing her old life in Seattle would break her. Now she understood it had set her free, to meaningful work, a thriving practice, and the kind of imperfect, authentic life she'd always deserved. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. "Dinner at 6. Luna's favorite sweet potato puree and the salmon you actually like." Lena typed back quickly, "Perfect. We'll bring dessert." The "we" felt so natural now. In the first hazy months after Luna was born, Lena had sometimes felt that phantom ache for a missing partner. Someone to witness Luna's first smile, her first giggle, her first wobbly reach for a toy. But over time she realized she and Luna were a team, whole, unbroken, and exactly enough for each other. "Mitchell?" Her assistant's voice buzzed through the intercom. "Your 3 o'clock is here." Lena glanced at her calendar, and for a heartbeat, old anxieties stirred, but she shooed them away. "No more doubting. You've earned this." "Send him in," she said, settling Luna into her bouncy seat, surrounded by soft blocks shaped suspiciously like tiny modernist buildings. James Morrison strode in with his usual blend of fatherly bluntness and sharp business instinct. But today he carried a leather portfolio that hinted this was more than a project check-in. "Lena," he said, lowering himself into the guest chair, while Luna squealed a hello, "I'll get right to it. The board has reviewed your numbers for this year." For half a second, the ghost of old fears flickered. What if I'm not enough? What if I've failed? But she caught herself and let the thought dissolve. She knew her worth now. She could measure it in communities transformed, families housed, children growing up safe and warm. James Morrison smiled, and the next words out of his mouth would change everything. She answered simply, "They do. Indeed." James Morrison flipped open the leather portfolio, spreading out crisp contracts and sets of polished architectural drafts. 3 major projects completed ahead of schedule and under budget. A waiting list of nonprofits requesting your designs. National recognition from the American Institute of Architects for innovation in socially conscious development. Right then, Luna chose to topple her stack of soft blocks, squealing in delight at her self-made chaos. Both adults paused to admire her tiny triumph before Morrison continued, amusement softening his tone. "And the remarkable talent to balance groundbreaking professional excellence with motherhood, which brings me to my offer." He slid the contract across Lena's sleek desk, thicker than any document she'd touched since her divorce papers. The top page, in bold letters, spelled out what it was: full partnership at Morrison & Associates. Her own division dedicated to humanitarian architecture, complete creative control, profit sharing. And Morrison tapped the relevant page, a child care policy designed for the realities of modern parents. Lena stared at the pages, heart pounding. Partner, at 33, after burning down and rebuilding every piece of her life. After all those lonely nights in Chicago, wondering if anyone would ever see her for more than just a pretty extension of her husband's resume. "The salary's competitive," Morrison said dryly, "but more importantly, this comes with what your old firm never offered: respect for the whole person. You're not just the polished mask you wear to meetings, you're the soul behind it." "Mr. Morrison?" Lena's voice caught, but she pressed on. "Why me? Why this?" He leaned back and gestured at Luna, who was now gleefully trying to chew on a phone block. "Because you've proven that great architecture isn't just blueprints and steel. It's about knowing that the walls we build shape the lives inside them. And because anyone who can transform affordable housing and raise a tiny tornado like that, well, you're clearly part human, part superhero." Lena laughed, a clear, bright laugh that felt like sunlight. "Can I have the weekend to think about it?" "Take all the time you need." though Indy's probably already designing your new business cards. After Morrison left, Lena sat at her desk with Luna in her lap and the contract spread open under her fingers. Every term was generous. The freedom was unheard of. And the security meant Luna would never doubt she was safe, wanted, provided for by her mother alone. More than any of that, though, this offer was proof that the path she'd chosen, the hard, lonely, terrifying choice to rebuild instead of reconcile, had led her here, to a life she'd made with her own hands. Her phone rang. For a second, the old anxiety flared. Ethan. But no, it had been months. The caller ID read Hannah. Relief and warmth spread through her chest. "Hey," Lena answered, pinning the phone between her ear and shoulder while Luna made a grab for her pen. "So," Hannah said, skipping all pleasantries, "I just heard from the nonprofit grapevine that someone got offered a partnership today. News travels fast in Portland. Are you going to take it?" Lena looked around her bright new office. At the neat rows of architectural models, the hand-painted thank you cards pinned above her desk, and the baby in her lap who would grow up knowing her mother had built all this from the ashes. She smiled. "Yeah, I think I am." Letters from families who now lived in homes she'd designed. A framed photo of Luna's first blueprint help, which mostly involved drool and grabbing for her mother's pen. "Yeah," Lena said into the phone, surprise coloring her voice as she realized the truth had already settled in her heart. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good," Hannah replied without missing a beat. "Luna needs to see her mama conquering the world." That evening, Lena sat in Hannah's backyard garden, explaining the new partnership to her sister, while Luna discovered the mysteries of grass and stubbornly tried to eat every dandelion within reach. For the first time in her adult life, Lena felt it, a perfect alignment between who she was and how she lived. The sunset over Portland painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, as if the universe itself had designed a canvas just for this moment. "You did it, sis," Hannah said, her voice low and full of pride. "You really did it." Lena looked down at her daughter, who was now methodically inspecting a blade of grass like a scientist on the brink of a breakthrough. "We did it," Lena corrected softly. "All of us." Somewhere far away in Seattle, her old life trudged on without her. Ethan had retreated to his hometown in Ohio, working for a small firm, reputation damaged and ambition dulled. Cora had vanished from the industry altogether. Her own games had devoured her chance at the future she thought she deserved. But here, in a backyard garden planted by her sister's patient hands, with Luna tugging at flowers and giggling at bugs, Lena Mitchell, architect, mother, partner, survivor, was finally completely home. 5 years later, Luna Mitchell Morrison stood at the edge of the new Riverside Community Playground, directing a swarm of neighborhood kids in a sandbox construction masterpiece. "The foundation has to be strong," she told a wide-eyed boy named Marcus, echoing both her mother's precise passion and Aunt Hannah's no-nonsense tone. "Otherwise, the whole castle falls down." On a nearby bench, Lena watched her second daughter, 3-year-old Sage, dozing against her side after a big morning at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Riverside had been Lena's crown jewel. 150 units of affordable housing designed like a real neighborhood. Community gardens, a daycare, shared spaces that turned strangers into neighbors and neighbors into friends. "She's got your eye for detail," Indy said, dropping down beside her with 2 cups of coffee from the new community cafe. Another piece of Lena's vision made real. "And Hannah's stubborn streak," Lena replied. Watching Luna demonstrate proper sandpacking technique with the authority of someone who'd grown up surrounded by blueprints and models. Lena's phone buzzed. A text from her newest client, a women's shelter in Vancouver, ready to break ground on a residential complex designed to feel like hope. At 38, Lena Mitchell had become one of the most sought-after architects on the West Coast, known for what glossy magazines now called empathetic design. Spaces that honored the lives inside them first, profit second. She'd spoken at conferences, collected international awards, and most importantly, created homes for thousands of families who deserved dignity and warmth. But her greatest accomplishment was simpler than any headline. She'd learned to trust herself, to choose herself, to build a life that felt true instead of merely perfect. As the afternoon light softened over the community she'd raised from drawings and dreams, Lena gathered her daughters and headed home, to the craftsman house she'd bought in Portland's Alberta district. A sturdy home with a big backyard and a little studio where she still sketched late at night under the moon. "Mama?" Luna asked as they crossed the playground, her small hand sticky with sand and ice cream. "When I grow up, can I build houses too?" Lena laughed, remembering her own childhood pencil sets lined up in perfect gradient rows, her notebooks full of dream floor plans. "You can build anything you want, sweetheart, anything at all." And as she watched her daughter's face brighten with possibility, Lena knew with unshakable certainty, some endings are really just beginnings in disguise. The community she built wasn't only made of wood and steel, it was made of second chances, brave mothers, and the radical truth that everyone deserves a place to belong. So that's how the story comes to an end, my amazing friends. You're still here with me at this very moment, aren't you? If you are, maybe it means something deep in this tale has touched your heart too. You know, life doesn't always play fair. People we trust might betray us, dreams we build can collapse overnight, and sometimes we're left carrying wounds no one sees. But as the Stoics remind us, the obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." These stories show us exactly that. Whether it's a woman bravely walking away from a cheating husband, or another rebuilding her strength from betrayal and heartbreak, they all teach us one thing. Pain can break us, but it can also rebuild us into someone wiser, kinder, and stronger than before. Maybe you've been there too, quietly carrying your own battles, putting on a brave face when the world expects you to crumble. I just want you to know, you're not alone, and you're stronger than any storm life throws at you. If you're still here, maybe it's a sign to take your power back, to forgive yourself, to let go, or to start over. Whatever healing means for you. And hey, if this story gave you even a tiny bit of hope or courage today, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need it too, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Because together, we remind each other every day, we are not our past, but we are always free to shape our future. Stay strong and see you in the next story.